Well, we're at 9:05, so let's officially get started. Well, hey everyone who's already on the stream, and today we have Shakar here. So, Shakar, how about you tell us about yourself and how did you get into data engineering?
Yeah, cool. Let's do that. Before I start, first of all, I just want to say, thank you. Um, Honestly, like I'm super impressed, Shinran, with everything that you do with this community. And, Shinran and I have been having several conversations over the past month or two. And it's just, first of all, your dedication to this and for helping and supporting and growing others. I know you don't get anything in return. It's just building the community. So it's not like it's your job or business. So thanks for doing this. And also it's, looking back, it's one of it's this community is exactly the type of resource that I didn't have when I started. It's, you say the same thing, right? This community did not exist. And looking for people to learn from and to help accelerate your growth and people that can inspire you, I had to find them myself. And now this community exists. So, thanks to you and for all your work in this. And also thanks to everybody who decided to join today and, taking your personal growth, taking responsibility for your own personal growth. It's not, I don't take it for granted. So, thank you for being here and for caring about these topics. Just a little bit about myself. So, I started my career with data about 20 years ago as an Oracle DBA. So it's Oracle 9206, if I remember correctly, just to date myself. I was an Oracle DBA, then I transitioned to a team lead position. And ever since then, I've been in leadership and management positions. I've worked in startups, small and medium sized startups, as well as larger companies like PayPal and Facebook was the latest one. At Facebook, my last role was the director of data engineering for all of Facebook, Instagram, and Messenger's trust and safety issues. And on top of that, I was the London data engineering site lead. So I joined Facebook back in 2017 as the first and only data engineering manager in London at the time. And I was basically responsible for growing the London site and building the engineering function in London. And we've grown from about 4 data engineers when I started to more than 200 towards the end. Today, I've left Meta recently, and today I work as an independent data advisor and trying to help as many people and as many companies as I can with my knowledge and expertise and passion for data. And that's it. And just before we dive into the Q&A, I just have one ask for all of you. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, feel free to add me, send a request, I'll accept that. I'm looking forward to connecting with people and getting to know people. I'm also now in the process of sharing a lot of my career insights and things I've learned over the years and, the things that have helped me grow. I'm posting about these kind of things. Some of that will appear also in data engineering things. But if anyone is interested, please just connect with me directly. And also, um, I've been thinking about building some sort of career growth courses or something like that. So if anyone is interested in these kind of things, also let me know, and I'll include you when these things come out.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Shakar. And yeah, I know yesterday we were just talking about you are thinking about building some career growth, more materials or a course for the community. I'm personally super excited for it. I do think that's a gap on the online resources. It would be really cool that if you can build something up for everybody to learn from, that would be super awesome. And I personally also follow you on LinkedIn, and I really love how you share your career story. And I highly recommend it for everybody to, connect with her on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you.
Cool. So before we dive deep into kind of different tips or career advice for data engineers, honestly, one thing whenever I meet people, um, first thing I ask, like, what is your definition of data engineering? Because when we look at data engineers from everywhere, different teams, different companies, different countries, we're doing different things. And just because the scope of data engineering right now is not very clearly defined. So, Shakar, I'm curious to hear from you. What is your definition of data engineering?
Yeah, for sure. So before we talk about my definition of data engineering, there's a couple of other things we need to define, right? Which the first one is software engineering. I think everybody knows what software engineers do or who they are, but my view is software engineers are people who generate data. They're not particularly good at it, but that's if ultimately, in my view, that's what they do. The way software engineers generate data is by building software that people use, and the output of that software is usually a lot of data in very raw format, and I would say in most cases useless form, right? So it needs a lot of shaping and structuring and organizing to make it useful for business. On the other side, you have business people, right? It can be product managers, it can be marketing people, finance, it can be sales and operations, it can be all sorts of types of business people. And these are people who make decisions, these are people who have questions, these are people who need to understand what is happening. And I think that data engineering is really the people who sit in between the business and the software. And on the one hand, they have good understanding of the software, the architecture, different services, the stack where data is stored, even the type of events that are generated in the system and the way the system works from a technical point of view. But on the other hand, they also have a very good business understanding, the metrics, the types of questions we want to ask, business definitions, how the business works. And they're essentially the people who bring those two things together. And I think that that's really, really critical. I think I know that there are a lot of data engineers who focus more on the technical aspects of the role, which is fine. And in a lot of cases, those are the gaps. But I think that the good data engineers or the best data engineers I'd ever worked with are the ones who really know how to bring technology and business together.
Yeah, that's really excellent. And I personally resonate with that a lot. A lot of people who's like really new to data engineering, and they would ask like, what's the difference between software engineering and data engineering? And one thing I like to talk about is that, without data engineering, there's still data, but is it usable? No, it's not optimized for any of the analytical or machine learning use cases. And that's why data engineering exists, is to bridge the gap between software engineering, where the raw data is, and to actually being able to use that data to solve business problems. So I really love your kind of explanation of data engineering. I resonate with that a lot.
Thank you. And I do have an analogy. I think sometimes many years ago, somebody asked me what is the role of a DBA. That was many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to demonstrate that to them. So, do you know the Yellow Pages book, the one with all the phone numbers? So I literally gave them a Yellow Pages book, and I asked them if they can find the phone number for Shahar Meir. So they weren't sure why am I asking this, but they quickly, ruffled through the pages, found the phone number, and gave it to me. And I said, "Fine. Now, can you tell me whose phone number is 1 2 3 4 5?" And they looked at me like that, and they were like, what are you talking about? And I said, whose phone number is this number? And they said, oh, I don't know how to find it. And I said, and that's exactly the point, right? Phone book, Yellow Pages book is a data structure that is optimized for very specific use cases and not optimized for others. And even though the data is there, like this piece of information is there because I knew it's there because I gave them a real phone number, it's almost impossible to find without doing a full scan, which would be very inefficient and would take them days. So that was a good demonstration of why data is organized in a certain data that's been organized in a certain way can address certain types of questions but not others.
Yeah, that's a really good energy here. Okay, so Shahar, you mentioned yourself too. There's a lot more people these days who are trying to interest in data engineering, want to break into data engineering. This community is only growing bigger, and also we talk about like how right now there's isn't that many kind of learning resources to help people guide their path or journey into data engineering. So here we're going to ask you, for everybody on this live stream right now, if you can give maybe three career advice for people who are data engineer who want to break into data engineering, what would that be?
Yeah, I'll give more general career advice if that's okay, not just about breaking
Yeah,
into data engineering, but just
definitely.
general about career. First of all, I want to say, as I said, there's going to be more on my LinkedIn, so please follow, connect, whatever. Um, there's a lot I have to say about that, but I'll start with the first thing, which is technology, right? A lot of people ask me questions about technology. Should I learn AWS? Should I learn GCP? Should I, learn focus on Python or Scala and these kind of questions, and what technologies and what stack do I need to learn? My answer is I don't think it particularly matters, right? Learn whatever your employer wants you to use, and whatever is used in your company right now. I think that the technology part is the easiest part to learn, right? And once you get the fundamental concepts of data modeling, of data visualization, of data integrations, and once you know how to do these kind of things, all these tools are pretty much the same, right? Each tool has some pros and cons, and some are more expensive than others, but fundamentally they all kind of do the exactly the same thing. I think that what people sometimes miss, and that goes back to my definition of data engineering, is they focus a lot about the technology part. They don't focus much about on the business aspects, right? Learn your business. So if you work in insurance tech company, right, understand insurance tech, understand how underwriting processes works, understand your customers. If you work in fintech company, understand how risk and fraud works, how the customer acquisition process works, how many people actually play with the products and dog food the products that they work on. How much time do you spend using these products as a user and trying to see it from the other side? How much time do you spend talking to business people? And it doesn't matter if it's your PM or salespeople or operations people, but even just spending time with them, I think is going to be good. So technology is important only in the first 1 or 2 years when you're trying to break through and kind of get into the role of a data engineer, but this is not what's going to help you grow from that point onwards. um, so that's point number one, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people confuse. The second thing I'll say is own your growth, right? Nobody will own it for you. I see a lot of people in both small companies and big companies that sort of expect somebody else to own their growth for them, and they complain about my manager is not telling me how to get to the next level, or I'm not growing in this company and I don't know why, or I don't have time to learn and invest in myself and learn new skills. And my message to you is very simple. There's your managers will change throughout your career, companies will change, technologies will change. The only thing that doesn't change throughout your career is you. Okay, so if you don't own your own growth and you don't um, take responsibility for that, nobody else will do it for you. Surround yourself with people you can learn from. Find managers who care about you and are invested in your growth and your career. Find good mentors. Personally, I can say I spent a lot of time trying to learn from the people around me. I spent money on good mentors at different times in my career when I needed to grow faster and I needed people to teach me things I didn't know how to learn otherwise. So spend time on the right mentors. Spend money if you have to. It's just gonna help you. It's just gonna help you grow. So that's the second thing about career growth. The third thing is understand what success means for your role. This is really, really important. Success is defined differently in different companies, and different companies, especially bigger companies, have a very structured process for evaluating people's performance, and even ratings, and sometimes your bonuses or things would be tied up to these kind of processes. And I think that a lot of people, especially people who are not managers, they don't understand these processes. They don't necessarily have a good understanding and mental model of what does success mean for them in the role. And because of that, they end up doing a lot of the wrong things, just because they don't really know what they need to do or what will make them successful. So, you know, when you have a good understanding of what success is in your job, in your role, then you will spend less time on the wrong things fundamentally. That will give you more time to spend on yourself, to spend on growth, to spend on your hobbies, or other things that give you energy. So this is really really important point. The fourth point I'm going to mention, which is kind of similar to that, but be respectful for your time, because nobody is going to do it for you. Okay. um, I see a lot of data engineers who feel a lot of pressure to be in certain meetings, to be part of certain decisions. They feel like they need to know everything, to learn everything, to understand everything, and have this kind of fear of missing out. And you don't need that. You don't need to be part of every decision. You don't need to be in every single meeting that your team is having. You don't need to feel that pressure. There is no pressure, right? Be respectful for your time and make sure you optimize your time and spend the time on the things that really really matter. And if you understand what success means in your job and you optimize for that, and you make sure that your time is focused on these kind of things, I promise you, you're going to grow way more than anyone else around you. And the last thing I'll say on career growth is just enjoy the ride, right? You don't need to suffer. Um, Everyone on this call is so lucky to be in a job that is intellectually interesting, to be working in good companies that in most cases look after their employees a lot, to work on fascinating and novel problems and projects. And there's no reason for you not to enjoy the ride. And I think that you spend so much time at work that, if you're not enjoying the ride, you seriously have to take a step back and ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? I'll say two things on this. The first one is, if you're too comfortable, you have to ask yourself if you're in the right place. And also, if you feel like you're not enjoying this anymore, you have to ask yourself, am I still in the right place for me right now?
Yeah, absolutely, Shakar. Those are really good advice. I think the first one, I resonated that a lot as I grew my own career as well. I remember when I was a student, when I first trying to get a job, and at that point, it feels like technical skills was everything, because we all look at the interview first, right? What do I need to pass the interview? What the box I need to check on the job description for me to get the job? But as I grow my career, become more senior, I realized there's a lot more soft skills that matter even more than technical skill. Like, for example, how do you work with business? How do you understand business? How do you build partnership? And how do you navigate the ambiguity in the business world? And those are the things that you learn with experience, but also is super critical for you as a data engineer to be a good engineer and being able to solve the data problem at your company. And also another thing you talk about is that owning your own career growth, right? That's something I also personally resonate a lot with, is that especially um, you know when people coming from like a student who are a college student who want to break into engineering, and I found myself early in my career, I also have that student mindset, because when you're in school, there's always teacher or like a curriculum or like a degree you need to follow, right? And then once that you are out in the wild after you graduate, and then it's everything, and then you have to be your own driver, trying to figure out what do I want to do, and then navigate all those the wild world, find all those resources and the people you want to connect with, and there's nobody holding your hand anymore. Like, it's just you, and you really have to be the driver of your career growth, know what you want, and then be there and making those connections and find those resources you need to get where you want to be. Cool. So we have a question from Jose. Let's see. Sorry, Shakar, which question you want to like to take first?
We can finish with your questions before that, and after, when we move to the Q&A, we can there's a few questions in the comments that I would like to address.
Okay. Maybe we can talk more about that at the end of the interview. Okay, cool. So there's some different career paths for data engineer. I think kind of similarly for software engineer too. People who might want to stay more on the SE track, from more junior to senior to staff and principal. But also there's a different path that maybe somebody who want to step into a leadership or management role. And you're I personally, that's the path I'm interested in. And also that's a very difficult transition to make. So I'm curious, like for data engineers who are interested in step into a leadership or management role, transitioning to those roles, what would be your advice for them?
Sure. My first advice would be know why you want to transition to leadership role, and make sure your motivations are very clear to you. Ask yourself questions like, are you more passionate about building things, or are you passionate about people? How much time do you want to spend on coaching people, on organizational stuff, on structuring teams, on generating direction, rather than spending on writing code. And people need to clarify that to themselves. I've seen a lot of people who want to move and transition to leadership roles for the wrong reasons, and that's almost never, the outcome is almost never good in those situations. So clarify the reasoning to yourself. I'll also say that if those things are not your strengths, like growing people, mentoring, managing situations, managing expectations, communication, if those are not your strengths, then you probably don't want to be in leadership positions. That's the worst thing you can probably do. Then if you're not sure, or one of the answers I get from a lot of people, then how do I know? I've never tried, I've never been a manager before, I've never been in leadership positions. Then in some companies there are ways you can try that, like managing and supporting interns, for example, mentoring people who are already in the team, and spending time with people who are earlier in their career. You can leverage the data engineering things community for that as well, and finding people who are earlier in their career and just try to support them, teach them, see if you enjoy that, and see if you're good at this and if you're getting good feedbacks. So clarify the why first, and make sure you're really doing this for the right reasons. Then I would say IC to managers transitions can be sometimes tough, especially if you're staying in the same team and the same company. For the most part, because transitioning to leadership means that you need to change your mindset. Success for a leader is very different from success for an IC. It's not about your ability to deliver anymore. It's about to build a strong team. It's about your ability to help people perform their peak performance. It's about your ability to grow and mentor people. It's a completely different success criteria, and I think that people don't always fully understand that. And I've seen a lot of people who transition from IC to manager role, and all of a sudden one of their team members is out on a prolonged leave, and they know how to do their job, so they end up spending all of their time doing this other person's job, instead of, for example, managing expectations, or instead of trying to resolve the situation. So I guess, especially if you transition in the same team, in the same company, make sure you're not getting pulled into doing the work yourself too much, and make sure that what does it mean to be successful as a manager on that team. Then the next thing I'll say is just do it gradually. There is no rush, right? Start with a small team, get yourself comfortable, grow from there. I think that managing a team of 10 people is a completely different job and a completely different skill set than managing a team of 50 people or a team of 500 people. Completely different. It's not the same skill set. And management, more than anything, is about adapting yourself as you grow, learning and also unlearning things, which is really, really important. You need to be prepared for that. Never put yourself in a situation that you're taking on too much scope on yourself, more than you can handle, and then you basically fall apart, your team fall apart, nobody's happy. These things always end up very poorly. So do it gradually. There is no rush. And the last thing I'll say is just be in a very supportive environment. Make sure that when you make this transition, your manager is going to be supportive. You're going to be surrounded by other managers who are going to help, that you're going to have the right setup, you're going to have good mentors in place, and so on and so forth. You don't want people just throwing you in the deep water and then leaving you alone. If the reason you get into management is because your manager has left the company, their manager has left the company, and you will be reporting to some VP who knows nothing about you or your team and doesn't have time for you. You have to ask yourself, is that the best setup for me right now to get into a new job? And if the answer is no, then you should probably be very careful.
Excellent. Another thing you mentioned is that, first of all, knowing that why you want to do it. And also another aspect is that if people are transitioning into a different type of role for the first time, it's going to be an experiment because before you actually do it, you don't even know if you're going to enjoy it or that's something you actually want to do in your career in a long time. So there's always that kind of trial and try period to see, hey, if you get an opportunity as a manager, do you like it? And but then also at the same time, there's no rush. Like you don't have to pick this path and then have to be continuing on it forever. What if someday maybe you just found that IC role is more enjoyable for you, and the people want different things at different stage of life and career as well.
I agree. And it's not an experiment, right? It's a choice. And
Yeah,
if you make that choice and 5 years later you realize that you're actually not good at it, you just wasted 5 years of growth where you could have grown as a good engineer and get to next levels and all of that. And instead of that, you chose to struggle a lot in a role that's not a good fit for you.
right. Definitely. Yeah. Another thing I want to ask you is about data engineering culture. So far we talk a lot about personal growth, personal career growth. So one thing I'm particularly passionate about is data engineering culture because, at the end of the day, when you, let's say, join a company, a big company with a mature data organization, or maybe a small team, and whether that company has a data engineering culture can really impact your experience as a data engineer and also your personal career growth too. And there's one common struggle I see a lot from, even myself in my past experience and also the other data engineer I talk to, is that a lot of times we feel as a data engineer in a big company, we feel so invisible. A lot of times we don't feel like we get the credits we need, we want, and we don't feel motivated because we're not getting the visibility that we deserve. So I'm curious, like Shakar, from your perspective as a data engineering leader, what's your opinion on that? Like when you think about data engineering culture, what do you think about?
Yeah. So there's two things I want to say. And by the way, one of them I actually posted about it on Tuesday, so you can read on my LinkedIn. But I'll start with a quick story. I mentioned my 4 years old daughter, and she's got a bunch of stuff in her room, and she was basically running out of space, and it was getting really messed up. So we bought this IKEA cabinet, like very big cabinet, um, and we assembled that, with the idea that we'll clear a lot of floor space in her room, so she has a lot of space to play. And as I was doing it, I was actually reflecting a lot on an interview I just had with a data engineer. And when I asked them, "What do you do? Tell me about your job and what do you do?" They started saying, "Oh, I use SQL, I use Snowflake, I use, Scala, whatever." They started telling me these things, which would almost be as if you ask me, "Hey, what did you do this weekend?" And I would say, "I used a hammer, I used a screwdriver, and that sort of stuff," which was factually 100% true. It was just not interesting, and it's not telling the full story of what I was actually doing, right? So telling you how I did it doesn't tell you what did I do. And I think that this kind of way of explaining and talking about your work, especially for data engineers, is very common because you talk to a lot of data engineers and they start talking to you about tools and about technologies and about the stack that they use and that sort of stuff, instead of talking about what is it that they actually do. So the good data engineers I've worked with, they actually talk about what is it that they do, right? And they tell you, I'm building this dashboard for growth accounting, or I'm building this metric, or I'm working on bringing data from these three different sources, consolidating that, and so we can do this. So they tell you what is it that they do, which is the equivalent of me saying, someone asking me, "What did you do this weekend?" And I say, I built a cabinet. And that's better. That's already way better. Um, the best engineers I've ever worked with in my career, they don't tell you what is it that they do. They talk about why do they do it and what is the problem that they're trying to solve, or the value that they're trying to create. So it would be something like, "Oh, our onboarding flow is really not very efficient. Our conversion rates are too low. So I'm building this exploration dashboard that will help us understand the full funnel and where are the drop off points. And then we're going to optimize that. And ideally, we want to increase our conversion rates by 10% by the end of the year. That's really solid engineer because they know how to connect the work that they do with the value that it's going to drive to the business. And I think that's also the equivalent of me saying, you asking me what did you do this weekend, and I say, my daughter doesn't have floor space, so I'm building this cabinet so we can create space for her. You see, I'm starting with the reason I'm actually doing it. So that's one thing that I want to stress out, that in a lot of cases data engineers just don't talk about the work in a way that is inspiring or interesting or even helps to understand. And then I've had that situation with my team members over the years where they feel invisible, they feel like people don't know what they do, people don't value their job and that sort of stuff. And then I talk to the PM, for example, or I talk to engineering managers or designers or whatever, and I ask them, about the work, and they say, oh, this person, they always tell me technical things that I don't understand. I literally don't understand what they're doing. So my first advice, to all of you is the way you talk about your work matters. It matters a lot. And if you don't want to be invisible, talk about your work in a way that's inspiring to people and a way that people can actually understand. The second thing I wanted to say is that you have to understand and respect the dynamics as a data engineer. And what I mean by that is, I have this analogy of building a house, right? And to build a house, you need builders. You need people who can lay bricks one on top of the other. You need plumbers who can put pipes in place. You need electricians. These are the builders. These are the people who build the house, right? And in our world, that's the equivalent of software engineers. So if you want to build a product like Netflix, the only thing you need is software engineers. You don't need anything else. You don't need designers. You don't need researchers. You don't need content people. You don't need, the only thing you need is engineers. And it may not be the most shiny product, the best looking product, the most usable product, but the product is going to be there. Now, software engineer, because of that, there's always this feeling that software engineers have the seat at the table and we don't have seat at the table, and they make a lot of the decisions and we're not even in the loop. I get that all the time. Then product managers, they help software engineers be more impactful. They help manage their job. They help them think up front. They help them resolve conflict. They basically clear the way so they can focus on building and engineering. So typically, software engineers really welcome the support of product managers. So if you're working in a product a company that's building products, you often see that software engineers and product managers work hand in hand almost. And unless the PM is really bad, they almost always have this seat at the table, and they're well respected within the team. Now, everybody else, and you have to respect that everybody else is not needed by default for building the product, right? So if you're a designer, if you're a data engineer, if you're a data scientist, you almost have to prove yourself. It's it may not be fun to hear, but that's the truth, right? And I don't know how many of you have built a house, and when and how many of you have worked with an interior designer. I know that in this house was the first time I worked with an interior designer, and it absolutely blew my mind. The way they think about things, they think about lines, they think about the flow of the room, they think about light, they think about reflections of things, about sound. They think about things that I wasn't even aware of. And I'm always going to work with interior designer in the future because they bring something so unique to the table that I never knew about that. And it is the same thing with data engineering. Once teams see the value that data engineers bring to the table, they will always want to work with data engineers. And you see that once data engineers show the value, usually the team is coming and asking for more help, more support, more data engineers. But you have to establish yourself first, and that's the truth. You're not going to get that for free. And one of the ways to establish yourself is to talk about your work, going back to my previous point, in a way that's inspiring and interesting for people, and in a way that people can actually understand.
Yeah, those are excellent points. About the part when you talk about how data engineers talk their work, like from my personal experience, I see that really play out in different ways. Like one thing that, let's say, even before you work on anything, it's important for data engineers to really understand the business problem. Like, hey, I am told to work on this project and I'm told to deliver this data, but how are the data going to be used? What are the business problem we're trying to solve with this? And not having that knowledge, it's really going to make a difference when you're thinking about problem. What kind of scenario are trying to optimize? How the data will be queried by data scientists or use in machine learning problem. So that having that concept help you to build a better data engineering system. And also at the same time, I also noticed that whenever we try to make sense, like, hey, why does my data engineering team exist? Why personalization data engineering exists? We always talk about the business problems or the business innovation we enable. Like just like you said, we don't talk about, oh, hey, we work on Druid today, or we work on Iceberg today, or we build a Spark pipeline. But what's more important is like, what does those data pipelines or system enable? Like, does it enable for us to better personalize our content? And that is where you make that connection between the technical work and the business world. And that's where you really showcase the impact of being a data engineer. And similarly, like even like, let's say we are not talking about like promotion within the same company, but also like when you're out there looking for jobs. Last time we did like a resume critique session with a recruiter from Netflix. And one thing we talk a lot about is that even when you're listing your projects or work experience on a resume, one thing recruiters looking for is that making that dots between your technical work and also the business impact you're making. Like even from a resume perspective, that's what people are looking for when they're trying to figure out, are you a good engineer or not?
I agree, completely agree.
Cool. Well, that's all the questions that we have prepared for today. So let's open the table for some live Q&A from the comments. So Shakar, did you see any questions in the comments that you want to pick up first?
Yeah, sure. Let's go quickly. So there is a question.
Mm-hmm.
I've scrolled all the way to the top. I'm just going to go by one by one from
Yeah.
Sujoy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's asking what are the tools that I need to learn, and I hope I answered this question already. But in case I didn't, um, I think learn whatever you need to get the job, right? So if SQL is going to be important, it's always good to know programming language. Python is fairly easy to learn and is fairly useful for data engineers. you know Other than that, whatever your employer is using, just use that, try to land the job. You can look at, if you're not sure what to learn, look at job descriptions and job postings, see what they ask for, and just learn that. I think fundamentally, if you learn Snowflake or Presto or Redshift, it doesn't matter. Like, the transition from one technology to the other is going to be relatively straightforward. So just learn what you need for your first job and take it from there. Um, Salaries, I'm not an expert in salaries. Just look at a Glassdoor, and there's a lot of other surveys. I don't know if anyone else, like, I don't know, Shinra, if you have any thoughts about that. But honestly, Glassdoor, I think, is sufficient for that, and just look at comparable companies and see what they pay. In the US, I think it's actually going to be complicated, just because it really depends on where you are, and different regions pay different salaries. Do you know, Shinran? I have no idea.
Yeah, so it's definitely different region per region. Like also depends on what state you're in. Like if you're in Bay Area, then you'll get paid a lot more compared to somewhere in the Midwest. And my favorite website to check for salary information is called Level FII. They have very transparent information. Like they also list different salary range for different levels too. So I found that very helpful. I'll post the website link in the comment as well.
Yeah, great. Maybe you can post it in the LinkedIn group as well, and in the Slack
Yeah.
channel. Um, yeah, cool. So you got an answer. It's a good
Hmm.
thing we have experts on the line. Um, what else? So there's a question from Kirti about being an ETL developer. Should I learn Python? So I'll say that the short answer is probably yes. It's good to know Python and learn anything you can learn. But I will say more in general that if you only use SQL and Informatica, then you're going to find yourself potentially in a situation where you build the same thing over and over again, because these are not programming language, right? SQL is not a programming language, is a query language, right? So you will end up doing things that are similar over and over again. And the advantage of using programming language, and it doesn't matter if you use Python or Java or Scala for that matter, is that you can generalize things, you can build tools and frameworks that will make you more efficient. And if you see that you're doing similar things over and over again, then you have the opportunity to build something that's more robust. It's also going to save you a lot of work. But again, it depends on what your company is using. If your company is not using Python and they use something else, then maybe it doesn't make sense for you to learn Python. But having a real programming language in your toolbox is definitely very important for any engineer. Oh, and I see that Victor responded and he said yes, which was my answer. So yeah, cool. There's a question from Jose about philosophical question: does growth matters more than ethics? I would actually love to discuss that. I'm just not sure what exactly did you mean by that.
Yeah, he actually gave a little bit more clarification on that question.
Okay, let me see. So we'll get to that in a moment. Um, right. So there's a question from Aviad. What career decision you regret the most? I guess if I had to do a session about, like, if I needed to start talking about mistakes I made in my career, we would probably need way more than 1 hour from that for that. So I'm not going to start right now. I will say, leaving your job too late is a decision. I don't want to say regret, right? Because things happen for a reason, and there were reasons why I didn't leave jobs, and it's taken me longer. But looking back, there are those situations where you're in the same job and, like, that it's not working for you anymore. Maybe you're not happy. Maybe you're not growing anymore. Maybe something else is happening, but because you're comfortable or because something else is happening, then you just wait and wait, even though it's not a question of if you will leave the job, it's a question of when. And I think those would typically be things that, looking back, I would say I would have done that differently. And also, I don't think I did that myself in my career, but I've seen a lot of people do that, and I'm going to write an article about that, which is leaving your job too early is also not good, because growth, it takes time for you to get to a place that you're actually learning and growing. When you start a new role, there's a very steep learning curve before you actually start growing. And I see people starting a new role, and then after 1 year they start another one, and then after 1 year they start another one. And during this time they're constantly in transition. They don't get to the point that they're actually stable and now they're learning and growing themselves. So I would say, and I'll talk about that in the future. But when you make career decision, just make sure the timing is very important. um, Best question interviewee asked you in the end of the job interview. That's good. Well, I guess the classic one is, did I pass? You spend 1 hour interviewing this person, and then in the end you're like, okay, do you have any questions for me? And they're like, how did I do? Don't do that. This is advice number one. If you're interviewing something, don't ask if you passed. Don't ask about salaries and that sort of stuff. That's not the right place and the right time to ask about these things. um, it's also not very good when you don't ask anything. I get that a lot when I interview somebody for a job and ask them in the end of the interview, do you have a question for me? And they're like, oh, no, I'm fine. I know everything. I'm like, interesting. How do you know everything about this company that this is only your second or third interview? So that doesn't reflect well on the person as well. maybe I should write about that as well, but I don't have anything like completely outrageous or juicy that people ask me. It's just that these weird awkward questions that I already have prepared answers for, and I say, "Oh, we'll talk to you later," and then everybody's feeling uncomfortable. Um, yeah, tools and skills required to become data architect role. That's a good question, data architect. So I would say, first of all, it's in architecture. There's a lot of decisions you need to make. Okay, you need to be able to bring people along in the journey, to communicate well, to absorb a lot of information, to synthesize and be able to explain, what are the challenges, what are your proposals, what are the different paths you can take, why do you think this one is better than that one, and so on and so forth. I think that good architects, going back to my explanation earlier, good architects also have very, very, very good understanding of the business. I've never seen good architects that only talk about technology and don't understand the business objectives and goals, and they don't understand what the business is all about. So spend time learning and understanding the business. Um, Architecture is a lot about soft skills. I would say that, like, you can learn a lot about technologies, but in the end of the day, it's your ability to bring a lot of people together, to put together a vision, to communicate that to people, and have them believe you that that's the right platform to build, or that's the right way of doing things, and then go and follow your lead. So it's almost like a leadership role, just that you're not managing people. You're mostly setting like a direction and having people follow you. So invest a lot in soft skills, and don't think that this is just about technology. What else?
So, Shakar, I see this question, I think is a really good one that's kind of relevant to the point that you talk about. So, how do you find assets or situation where that actually provide a good and supportive management environment before you step into? And how do you approach and evaluate it yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, I would say that when you look for a job, don't think that they're only interviewing you, you're also interviewing them, right? You have the right to ask to talk to the hiring manager, for example, which I don't think a lot of people do, and just see if that's a person you like, see if you have a good connection with them, see if you can communicate well with them, you understand them. I always like to ask managers when I'm interviewing, what would be your expectations for me? What does success look like in my role, in this role that I'm interviewing for? And um, you can ask them, what did your highest performing team member do last half, or how did you handle such and such cases before? If you have any conflict, or anyone else, feel free to ask questions and be curious. um, I will tell you that, just like every other interview, you can collect some signal, but you cannot know for sure. But asking these questions is better than not asking them. Then, if you have friends who work for this company, I would talk to them, because they're probably going to be more honest than anyone else. And just ask them, what is it like to work for this company? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Um, and try to collect as much information as you can. Try to read reviews on Glassdoor and other places. Companies that are not doing very well, you're probably going to read about that if you just look for it. So try to gather information, and don't just make a gamble and think that it's going to be fine. Um, you will never know for sure, and it's always possible that you join the company, you have the best, most amazing manager. 3 months later there's a reorg, and then you have a bad manager and not very supportive manager, or your manager leaves the company. So be open for change, but try to collect information, and don't just blindly go to whatever.
Excellent. Um, Another question I think will be very interesting. So, how can we identify critical problems that can be solved using data engineering?
Yeah, hey Sana, good to see you. So how to find and identify problems? Try the product, depending on the company that you work for. If you work for Netflix, for example, use Netflix. If you work for PayPal, try to transfer money with PayPal. As a user, you will probably immediately know what's not working for you. That will give you a lot of ideas for what you can probably change. And a lot of big companies, they really try to incentivize their employees to try and do a lot of dog fooding and try their products all the time, because that's the best way you can get feedback. So that's number one. The second thing is spend time with people. So if you're a data engineer working in sales organization and building data sets for salespeople, how often do you actually go and sit with salespeople, have lunch with them, talk to them about their pain points, their challenges, what's not working for them, what are one or two things they wish they could have done or could have known and they cannot, and build relationship with the people who eventually use your data. I think this will really help you, understand what the pain points are and identify opportunities. I spent, in my previous company, for example, I spent some time with customer support, just sitting there, listening to their calls, seeing how they work. And I'm like, oh, but why do you not have that in your tool? And they say, oh, we ask for it all the time and nobody is prioritizing that. And 2 days later we build that for them and they're so excited and everybody's happy. So spending time with people and going out of your bubble and your engineering bubble and just spending time with your stakeholders is probably the best thing you can do. And then talking to other data engineers, because in the end of the day we all do similar jobs. So if you want to get inspiration from other people who are in a similar role, ask them, what do they work on, what kind of projects do they do. That will inspire you and give you ideas for things you might not be thinking of.
Great. I think you kind of already touched on this problem, but Curtis is asking, how can we build our business acumen, especially if we're entering a new industry domain that we have never worked on before?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of the same thing, just spend time with people. So if you go and work on marketing data for the first time and you've never done this before, go spend time with your team, with those teams. That's going to be more important than anything else that you do. Try to understand, how do they work, what do they do every day. Even just sit next to them. If you work in an office and there's an open sitting, just move your laptop, sit next to a marketing person and just look at their screen the whole day. Just tell them you're doing that, so you're not being very awkward. But that way you're going to learn a lot about this. The second thing is ask a lot of questions. One of the mistakes I see that people make is they don't ask questions. They feel like, oh, maybe people are going to think I'm stupid, or that people are going to think that I don't know what I'm doing. Be curious. I mean, it's okay to ask questions. You're not going to learn if you don't ask. So just be curious, ask a lot of questions. There's no shame in that, and the more you ask, the faster you learn. So yeah.
Excellent. One more question here. I think this one's pretty interesting. How do you convince managers who are resistant to change or adopt a new technology?
um, well, good question. I mean, there are a lot of reasons for why somebody might be resistant or not want to make a change. And I think you, first of all, you need to understand where they come from. Why is it that they don't want to change? Understand their decision making process and have empathy to their situation. The second thing is, from my experience, I've seen a lot of engineers coming up and introducing a lot of new technologies that are very shiny and exciting for them. But for me as a manager, it wasn't very clear what is the problem that they're trying to solve. Why do they want to change? What do they want to introduce a new technology? Why should we care about, right? And you have to know that every time you introduce new technology, you also introduce potential challenges, you also introduce new constraints, you also introduce something else that everybody else who joins the team needs to know about. Otherwise, you're the only person who knows how to do something. So there's a lot of considerations behind the scenes. So unless you have a very compelling and good argument for why you want to do it, I think it's going to be difficult. So make sure you communicate that well, make sure you understand their point of view. And if after all of that they're still resistant, some people are going to be resistant no matter what you do. But usually if you do it right, then at least you can have a meaningful conversation about that.
Great. Okay. This is the one last question. What do you find most rewarding about working as a data engineer?
Hmm. Um, so I think that when you can see the impact of your work and what it does to the business, and how you see a company that's built a good product and they're not able to grow because they just don't understand anything, and then you build some dashboards and funnels and metrics, and all of a sudden people start to understand what is happening, and you see that they're asking good and meaningful questions, and all of a sudden they understand, and then your product grows from only few thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people to millions and 10 millions and billions. Then that's super super exciting, and knowing that they could not have done this without you, and that it's your work that generated this level of understanding, I think is for me the most rewarding thing. And also I just think that most of the data engineers I've worked with over the years, they were just really amazing people to work with, very smart, very curious. They have a good balance of both personality and also technology, and it's a role that enables you to do both business and technology. It's not just one or the other, which for me is the best thing.
Excellent. Well, we're right on time. Well, just like what I said, thank you, Shakar, so much for your time. You provided so much insight for me and the community today. I really appreciate it. And hopefully, maybe in the future, we'll bring you on our webinar again and talk more about data engineering. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much again for doing this, and for organizing, and for everything you do for this community and everybody else. Please connect. Let's continue the conversation. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask me directly. And yeah, wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you everybody for joining. So I know that we still have a couple questions that we didn't get to, but Shakar, if you want, feel free to take a look at the comment on LinkedIn, and if you want to answer some of them, please feel free to follow up. But otherwise, have a great day, everybody, and thank you for joining. Yeah,
Thank you. Bye.
bye.